up, my Good Vibe DJ tribe, and thank you for joining us on another episode of the DJ Spotlight here on Disc Jockey News TV. Based out of Toronto with more than 2 decades of experience, she's a producer, DJ, and vocalist. Her international gigs reach as far and wide as the Netherlands, Israel, Jamaica, Mexico, and Argentina. But it doesn't stop there. She runs labels Modern Agenda, Honey Drop, and still makes time to host a monthly show on FriskyRadio. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Amber Long. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And thank you for hooking us up last week with the Nick Muir interview. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much for contacting him because he's a legend. So I'm really happy that he had as many platforms as he did to just tell people, you know, about his tour, about everything. So yeah, he's awesome.
Yes. Well, obviously, awesome people attract one another. So it doesn't surprise me that you guys get along so well. I would love to hear a little bit about your introduction into the industry and where it has brought you to where you are today.
Okay. I come from a very musical upbringing. You know, my dad did a lot of music as well as throughout my life. Like literally for the teenage pop and chip parties, I had like 2 cassette players and I DJ'd with cassettes and stuff like that. That was really back in the day. But I really got into music in this kind of sense. I started doing spoken word in the indie side of things in the early 2000s. I always love electronic music, but spoken word I started out. Then I went into more indie stuff and I was singing. And somehow along the way, I ran into Robert Mason, who I met. And I asked him if he would help me remix some of the tracks that I've been producing, as well as kind of like make them more dancey. So this would have been 2010, and he took that task on. We just like met each other at the same gig. And then from there, I actually started hearing where things could go with electronic music production, because I was always the girl that was standing on a stage doing electronica in a place where people were playing guitars. And there was never really a place for me to fit. So when I started working with Robert, the music that, you know, he was putting out as well as my music was more, he pretty much just said, if you want to play your music live, you got to learn how to DJ. So I was like, And it was around the time that the Sasha remix competition was happening, and I was seeing like everybody doing remixes and stuff, and I'm like, I got a tune to remix. I want to be on Beatport. So I got some remixes done. I ended up on Beatport, and by the luck of the draw, I had some great friends doing stuff in my hometown that they let me DJ for my first release on Beatport. And Robert taught me. So he taught me how to DJ and track selection. I've been working in radio and volunteering for radio for a long time. So I was confident about track selection, but I had so much to learn, you know, right from the get-go. Fast forward, I started doing vocals for the electronic music side of things, and just playing more and more live. And then that progressed to starting the label, and it's just, I think it just became a huge body of work. You know, it had very humble beginnings where I was reciting poems, you know, and now it's just always still growing. It's always still new. Yeah, it always feels new. Even though there's like a huge body of work, it still feels just like the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like that's really relatable, especially if you're constantly learning and growing, right? I love that you made it happen for yourself. You started asking questions, you started putting yourself out there, taking risks. And speaking about taking risks and having these different experiences, what are maybe some surprising lessons you've learned along the way? Maybe something that people don't really think about when they first get into this industry?
Yeah, I already knew this question was coming, but I didn't quite know how to respond because everybody's going to have their own path. Everybody is going to take their own chances, and they're going to have their own area of expertise that they're going to go after. But the one thing that I've learned is, like, there's no such thing as an overnight success. And even the people who look like they might be an overnight success, or that things all of a sudden are like blooming and blossoming for them, chances are they have like a decade, more than a decade behind them in something that they're doing. So I think there's a misconception that if you put out a track and it gets noticed, or, you know, like little things here and there that, you know, for somebody just starting out might be huge things. You know, there's no such thing as an overnight success. You have to keep building. You have to keep building. You have to show that you're in it to win it, like for the long period of time, and that you don't burn out after X amount of years or something like that, because so many people do, you know? But yeah, that was my one note, that there is no such thing as an overnight success. So looking at anybody and comparing yourself and being like, I want to be like that, or I want to be like that, it just doesn't work, because everybody has a path that we haven't seen.
I really like that you mentioned that, looking at it as this bigger picture. Don't burn yourself out all at once, because we hear about that in the industry all the time, about these big, famous DJs that have to take a break because they've absolutely burnt themselves out. You have so much on the go. How do you keep yourself efficient?
I love this. I love this. I'm literally wired to do this. So I'm not going to get cliche or anything, because it is like work a lot of the days. Yeah. And there's a lot to it to keep it going. But you just have to prioritize, just like some people prioritize going to the gym. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but you know, you have to prioritize music. You have to prioritize figuring out an Instagram post. You have to prioritize all these little things that equate to big things, you know? But yeah, as far as efficiency, you have to make the time. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just like self-care. It's artistic care. And most artists, like the long-term lifers, like I said, you usually can tell because they have it in them, and then they start getting upset or depressed or really frustrated if they can't express themselves. So I think maintaining that efficiency, allowing yourself the time, giving yourself the time, encouraging yourself to take the time to do your music stuff is, you know, you're going to maintain efficiency if you keep doing work, right?
And I love the way you word that, because it's taking power of that time. Instead of saying, I don't have time, you're saying, I'm choosing to spend my time this way. Exactly. That's 100%. And if you love what you do in whatever capacity, so whether you're into DJing and you want to, like, you know, mix and make new mixes and like find new tracks or whatever, dive into that. If you want to produce and you want to make a new tune and you want to test out all the sounds, dive into that. If you want to learn how to mix and master, then you got to dive into that. So whatever you're into, make the time for that and just go, like, that's your time. That's your music yoga time. Yeah, your music yoga time. I like that. Yeah. So what some people might not know about you is that you're also a parent. We have actually a lot of the DJs I've talked to are parents on this show, or starting families. And so many of us, even just thinking about that, we're trying to, like, how do I manage my time? How do I find this balance between, like, being on the road or Sky and you know, performing? What advice would you have for them to try to find some sort of balance, or is there? I don't believe that any artist is very balanced.
I don't think that when you're very passionate about something, that it's able to be considered balanced. I do find that you can have a nice ebb and flow that begins to happen. Because when I started, my kids were really little, so it's all they've ever known. So of course, when they were really little, I wasn't traveling overseas. I wasn't doing those things, but I had a radio show once a week. So maybe I was able to leave for like an hour at a time, and I did that. I had a spoken word, like open mic night that I did once a month. So when they were really little, it was just little things that I could do because I couldn't leave, and everything changes because you actually don't really want to go. You know, you want to have the best of both worlds, and it's just like as your children grow, so does your freedom, and so does their understanding of what you're doing. So fast forward to today, I was talking to my daughter, who's almost 20, and I don't know if you know Lanya, but Lanya is a great producer, and he just had his second baby. And I did a voice note, and I said to my daughter, I said, so what's it like having a musician parent for your entire life? Like, do you have anything to say? And all she said was, it's just normal. It's just normal. And I laughed because that's the first time in my life that somebody actually said being a musician or an artist was something normal. And I said, see, don't worry. They're just going to grow up as long as you love your kids. Mm-hmm. Your artistry is going to be normal, and they're going to see you going after something you really want. Because everybody can get a job if they get the right qualifications. Not everybody can be an artist. So you just grow. So eventually your kids get old enough that they can spend a weekend at their grandma's. So then that's when you have a weekend trip, and you plan for that. And it takes 6 months, 8 months to figure out when you can do that, and you do it. And then it just grows from there. So the first time I actually went overseas was 2013. So my kids were 15 and 13. I'd done North America quite a bit, but I hadn't gone overseas. So that was the first time, and I figured it was time because they were like, go, do it. They knew by that time this is what their mom does. And in 2.5 weeks, my daughter comes to her first ADE with us.
Nice.
Yeah. So she is at that point where she's been asking for 4 years. Unfortunately, my son has to work, but it gets to the point where your kids don't live with you anymore, and you can still continue your dream and doing your music in different capacities. And your children will always grow up as long as you give them love and lots of time, like as much time as you can. But they're always going to be like, my mom or dad or parents showed me that I could do anything. In a world where, you know, odds are stacked against them, you know, it's somewhat easier to be a doctor than a musician. You know what I mean? Sometimes it feels that way. Mm-hmm. So for your kids to see you have successes in something you love, that's something they carry throughout the rest of their life, you know, and then they build on that. So, yeah.
It's being the example, right? So many times you hear people say, I would have done this, but then I had a child. And like, what a horrible thing for your child to hear and think, what? Or daddy didn't follow their passion because that's exactly how I felt when I had my son. I was like, I do not want this kid to think I can't do this. And gosh, the efficiency that we have when we have children, it kind of makes you wonder how you spent your time before they were around. I completely, you know what, you asked me about efficiency. Efficiency is when I first started out in my hungriest time of learning to make music and just going crazy. Mm-hmm. It literally was when they were their smallest, and I would get them to bed and I would produce until 4 a.m. I'd sleep for 3.5 hours, get up, get my daughter to school, bring my son on a walk, like we had our morning walk, come home. He was ready for a nap. I napped, and that was my cycle
for many, many years. And then, you know, and then it got to the point where if I had moments, like we all have moments of discouragement where we're like, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this. So my son has come back at me and been like, you can't quit. What was it all for? What was it all for? You know, like, nope, sorry. You know, and then it really doesn't matter what anybody around you says, because the most important people in your life are like, you know, they're your cheering squad. So I admire you so much. I've watched you through your pregnancy and everything, and I wondered, I'm like, is she going to keep doing this? And you're back and you're better than ever. So
thanks, girl.
Totally.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know for a while. And I was like, I don't know. Can we do this again? And then we did. And now we're here. And I get to talk to wonderful humans like you, who are also so incredibly inspiring to watch. You know, one of the things that a lot of DJs dream of doing is the travel that you're experiencing, playing huge venues and performing our own music, meeting our icons. What do you think maybe there's some misconceptions DJs have when it comes to traveling as an artist, and how would you recommend dealing with those experiences?
The misconceptions, that everything that you see on social media actually is legit, because that's not true. Because the complicated situations that happen while you are doing gigs abroad, maybe the sound system doesn't show up for 6 hours. Maybe the promoter makes you find your own way to the gig, which is 4 hours away. Maybe something happens and you just don't get paid your fee and you were counting on that. And, you know, there's always something that goes wrong. It doesn't matter if you're local, if you're abroad, or whatever. You have to just roll with it. Because just because social media makes it look like it was the best ever and nothing went wrong, let's be real. It's a live situation and stuff goes wrong. And, you know, so don't believe everything you see on social media, first of all. The other thing about traveling abroad is sometimes you have to put yourself in those places. So nobody is sitting there looking for DJs from Canada who, you know what I mean? Like, maybe they are, but sometimes it's easier to find the gigs by putting yourself in places where you can meet the people, like what you're doing, or make connections or introduce yourself to people. You know, I'm not saying shamelessly self-promote yourself or anything like that. I'm saying make actual connections, enrich somebody's life in the music community, and sure, have a body of work. Absolutely. Have your work that you've done. But also longevity, show you're serious about it. You know, give somebody a reason to have you at their venue. And it's not always, part of my whole like vehicle for all this, because I spent my 20s and 30s raising my children, is that I wanted to use music to propel myself to see the world. So it's always been my number one goal, always. You know, even my kids have always known that I want to go see the world and bring my music in those places. So maybe that's something that people have to set out in their mind's eye, that's something that they want to do, because, you know, where focus goes, energy flows. Is that what this saying is? Yeah. So if you really want to be traveling and touring internationally or getting international gigs, then you have to actually put yourself in those places, and you have to plan 6-8 months ahead, you know, and put out feelers and put out blind calls. And, you know, like 80 is amazing. You put yourself and you can just meet people. So Robert and I are going to be in Europe in the spring. So we already know that come October, in a few weeks, we're going to be trying to line stuff up, you know, for that. So you have to have a lot of foresight realize that stuff's going to go wrong, so nothing's going to be perfect, and make enriching connections. Don't just make party connections, because that atmosphere is constantly changing, but the enriching connections, you know, where it's based on the same mutual respect and love of music, get those. Yes. Do those. Be part of those. Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of focus brings in those type of people. Yeah. Driven, ambitious, reliable. So beautifully put. I hope people are taking notes, because you've made so many amazing points in this interview. I want to ask you, is there anything you'd like to end with, upcoming releases or tours you want people to know about?
Oh boy. Well, first and foremost, ADE is a big deal. ADE, Modern Agenda, has a showcase party on the Friday, and then we have a private boat party on the Sunday. Robert and I are playing for the Manual Music Party on the Saturday. And for releases, tomorrow there's one on Stripped that I did with Norman. So I've known Norman since forever. Like, he's one of the first people I met in this business. And so finally we have this collab together that we did. And then today I'm actually in the studio because I'm going to work on, I have a track due for a compilation on Golden Wings. So takes me forever. So I've been working on this forever. So hopefully I get some headway today. And what else? Yeah, we're going to go to Europe. We're going to go to Europe in the spring and the stops I haven't figured out yet. So I'm talking to people at ADE about that sort of thing. And it's going to just be more of the same. Growing the label, making connections, seeing where we can put ourselves and, you know, make more connections. And do you ever feel when you're so intense about music that it's really hard to relate on a one-to-one basis with the average person? But then you find these kindred spirits that you can communicate with, or you can just be yourself with, or talk with about music or your life or your. So those people, they're not necessarily always found in one city. Mm-hmm. You have to go find them, you know. So that's kind of part of what I do for my career. Yeah.
Well, it's such a wonderful journey to watch. I remember when you were writing quite regularly, and you shared a few of my blog posts, and I remember thinking, like, man, we are on that same wavelength. We're in different cities, but somehow we're like finding one another. And I just think you're such an amazing example of somebody within the industry that gives more than they take. And I think that's such a valuable lesson for artists out there, because a lot of the time we do a lot of asking. Will you book me? Will you sign this track? Will you do this for me? And when we start giving more than we take, suddenly those things start coming into our life. So I feel like a lot of your success has to do with these good vibes and these things you're just selflessly doing for other people. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
You're sweet. I was just going to say, if you take care of your business and you don't have a lot to ask for, when it actually matters and you need to ask for help, that's when people are like, no doubt there in 2 seconds flat. So rather than ask for everything that you could figure out yourself, or like, you know, just save your favor asking for when it really matters, and then it'll probably be a good result. And then you learn stuff along the way by figuring it out yourself, you know? So yeah, it's a lot of what you're seeing is just me growing with everything that I'm learning too. So
well, you're doing an amazing job.
Thanks.
Yeah. For the rest of you that are tuned in to this chat, was there anything in the interview that really stood out to you? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your stories of growth. But until next time, make sure no one kills your vibe.